Hello, this is Father Hightower, and welcome to Vox SFX, the voice of St Francis Xavier Parish in Missoula, Montana. We are so pleased that you have joined us. Your participation enriches our entire community. We hope that our show serves as a point of light, helping to deepen our understanding and experience of the Catholic faith in history. So join us as we seek through prayer, study, interviews, and discussion the roots of the practice of our faith. God bless.
St Francis Xavier has a new priest. Now, those of you who attend St Francis Xavier will be able to meet him on a Faria night later this month. But for those of you who may not be here, you're probably going to be hearing quite a bit from him. I've very much enjoyed talking with him for this episode. He has had a remarkable journey coming here to Missoula, Montana. He worked with Father Cochran quite a bit and knew him very well throughout the course of his career, and did similar work up in Alaska. But his interaction with the people of Alaska was rather singular. And one of the things we're going to go into in this episode is the relationship between the church and the indigenous tribes, given the history that we've had in these particular areas. So he has some really keen insights as to how the church is recovering from that particular period in our history. If you do get a chance to hear Father Mark, he is a powerful homilist, and I have very much enjoyed hearing him speak. This last week, for instance, was a very, very powerful message of peace and tolerance and respect for everybody, and I look forward to hearing more from him. So I am eager to introduce to you Father Mark Hoelsken.
If you've been listening to God for a while and feel He may be calling you to a deeper relationship, you're not alone. On a daily basis and across the world, Jesus is inviting people just like you to follow Him. So where does one begin? Many people are finding answers and a profound sense of belonging in the Catholic Church. Whether you're new to Catholicism or have been away for a while, you are always welcome home. Begin renewing your relationship with God by attending Mass and learning more about the Catholic faith. We encourage you to accept Christ's invitation and begin your faith journey today at St Francis Xavier Parish or your local Catholic church.
With us in the studio today is Father Mark Hoelsken. Father, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, you are our most recent priest here at St. Francis Xavier, and so I thought that it would be sporting to give the folks a taste of your voice, a taste of your life, so that when they hear you on the show later, they know who you are.
Okay.
So, who are you, Father? What's your story?
Well, I grew up in Denver, Colorado. So one of the things about coming here to Missoula is I'm really delighted to be back in the Rocky Mountains. So I grew up in a fairly large family in Denver, 8 of us. So I have 3 brothers and 4 sisters. When I was still a young man, a few years out of high school, I had gone and gotten a technical background in electronics, and I was a technician. And then suddenly one day I remembered something. And that was that when I was like a freshman or sophomore in high school, a young lady was welcomed back to the school after her Christmas break, I think it was, and we all were gathered into the gym by the sisters to listen to her tell us about her volunteer experience somewhere in Central or South America. I don't remember any of the details about what she told us, except I remember saying to myself, I'm going to do that someday. Well, anyway, so I suddenly remembered that one time, and I said, well, now I better do that if I'm ever going to do it. And I ended up in the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, and I went to Nome, Alaska.
Now, what is the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, in case people haven't heard of that?
Okay, the Jesuit Volunteer Corps is an organization that grew up out of the need of helpers teaching school up in Alaska. A couple of the sisters said, well, I have some nieces and nephews that are just graduating from college. Why don't we have them come up and join us for a year? And that's how the Jesuit Volunteer Corps started. When I came along, there was a radio station in Nome, Alaska, and that's where I was sent.
A radio station, huh? So are you coming after my job, Father?
No. So it is today an organization that takes young people fresh out of college, usually, and offers them an opportunity to give a year of their life to doing some kind of volunteer work, serving the mission of the church, but particularly the mission of the church in social justice areas. So soup kitchens and daycare centers and women's shelters and those sorts of things.
So it's a little bit like AmeriCorps, but within a religious setting.
Yes, very much. Yeah, that's right.
So how did you come to be a Jesuit priest, Father?
Well, it was in the course of my first couple of years of doing that. I loved it. I loved what I was doing. I loved the experience. And it was during my second year that I said to myself, gee, I really like this. I like the lifestyle. I like serving in this way. And I loved the people I was becoming close to in Nome, Alaska. And I said, how do I continue to do this? And I looked at the Jesuits that I was meeting, and I said to myself, yeah, I can throw my lot in with a group like that. So that's how I came to enter the Society of Jesus.
Where did you get your education for it?
So I studied philosophy in Spokane at Gonzaga, and then I studied theology in Toronto at Regis College, which is part of the University of Toronto campus.
Our outgoing priest, Father Cochrane, whom I think you're familiar with, he also spent a good portion of time in Alaska, particularly in rural Alaska. How did you find your time up there in the frozen north?
Well, it was good to work with Paul, for one thing. Paul came through the very same channels that I did. He also studied philosophy in Spokane. He also studied theology in Toronto. And then he came up and joined us in Alaska. When I first got to Alaska, I was sent directly from the floor of the church where I was ordained. I was ordained in Seattle at St. Joe's. And I was sent directly to Nome. I mean, not to Nome, but to Western Alaska. I was just delighted to be able to return to Alaska. When I got there, I was scared. I had no idea how to be a priest. In fact, I have an unusual ordination experience in that a lot of guys talk about their ordinations in very glowing and flowery terms. For me, it was the most terrifying thing I've ever gone through in my life.
Really?
No, I couldn't sleep the night afterwards. I had my first mass the next morning. I didn't get an ounce of sleep. I just said to myself in the dark of the midnight, I said, oh my God, what just happened? This has got to be a big mistake. I don't know how to do this. Anyway, so I tell you that in order to say that when I got to the villages in Alaska, the first thing I said to people was, I don't know how to be a priest. I'm going to need you to teach me how to be your priest. And people did that. And I don't say that lightly. I learned to be a priest in the villages in Western Alaska. And to this day, I'm still learning how to adapt from the things I learned to do and the way I learned to be in those remote villages. So every time I go into a new place, and now I'm here in Missoula, first time I've ever been assigned, since my ordination, first time I've been assigned to a large urban center, a large parish in an urban center. And that's a huge change for me. I have a lot to learn. I'm way down on a pretty steep learning curve right now.
Well, I think people would be tickled to hear you refer to Missoula as a large urban center.
Yeah. Well, it is a large urban center to me.
Oh, I get it. I grew up in the woods here in northern Montana, so when we moved down to Missoula, we were moving to the big city.
Okay, so you understand what I'm saying. Okay.
So when you're talking about how differently things were done there in the villages in West Alaska and the learning curve that you have kind of coming back to the big urban center that is Missoula, what do you mean by that?
Well, in Alaska, about 50% of every day I spent on survival. I had to haul water. I had to haul my honey bucket out. I had to maintain my means of travel. Getting by day to day in that remote region is a lot of work. And getting food, I had to get food. Now, people gave me a lot of food. They live a subsistence lifestyle there. And so people were giving me a lot of food too. But I had to learn, in order to participate in the culture, I had to learn how to hunt and fish in that environment and how to get around and do it safely. And yeah, it was a lot of work just surviving from day to day. Things would go wrong, things would happen all the time. I have to do some repair work. And again, people were happy to help me, but they understand what it means. And when I say they, I mean the folks in the villages. They understand what it means to have to take care of yourself. So I did as much as that as I could as well.
How long were you up there?
30 years.
30 years.
Yeah. Now, the last 10 years I was living in a place called Bethel, which is kind of the hub of the region. All the airplanes go in and out of there. The hospital is there. Government services are provided there, etc. So my last 10 years was primarily living in Bethel and going out from Bethel to do the work that I was doing then.
So you spent a lot of times on planes and snowmobiles then?
That's right. A lot of time on planes and snowmobiles and in boats.
Now, you didn't come to us directly from Alaska, though. You came by way of Canada, right?
That's right. So when I left Alaska, this was about 4 years ago now, I was asked to consider going up to Ontario, Canada, to the Anishinaabe Spiritual Center, which is a little bit north of the shore of Lake Huron, and to work there with a training program that was very similar to the training programs that I worked with in Western Alaska. The last half of my time in Western Alaska basically was working with the training programs, the deacon training program, and a little bit with the lay ministry training program there, because we recognized very early on following Vatican II, the Jesuits in Alaska recognized very early on that the key to the church surviving there was to follow the lead of Vatican II, providing for a renewed diaconate. A vital deacon training program out in the rural areas was vital to that. And I directed that for the last 10 to 15 years of my being there.
And so you did something very similar when you went to Ontario.
I went there to do something very similar, but that, I won't go into the details of it, but it just didn't work.
Well, at the staff meeting the other day, you were talking about the wonderful cabin that you had there by the lake and how spoiled you felt.
Oh, I was
that.
spoiled. I lived in a cabin, woke up on the shore of a lake, listening to the loons in the summertime, wood heat from a wood stove in the wintertime. It was kind of idyllic. I lived there with one other Jesuit.
So when we find you there at the Jesuit house, making a campfire in the background to remind you of good old times, we'll understand why.
Yeah.
So I guess one of the questions I want to ask, and I don't mean to be controversial here, but the church has a little bit of a checkered history with the native tribes of America. How were you able to reconcile that? How were you able to kind of work within that paradigm to still minister to the spiritual needs of these folks?
Yes, it is checkered. It's a tragic story, the way the church got co-opted into the government, and this was true in the United States as well as in Canada. The government's attitude toward Native people was to conquer, overcome, and in large part to eliminate indigenous people. They were troublesome, the government had always felt. Now here in the States, unfortunately, indigenous people in the lower 48 of the states suffered serious attempts at violent elimination. Also, cultural genocide was practiced in the schools. And one of the ways we know that, the way it was articulated was kill the Indian and save the child. That's how, what was that school in Missouri? It's not coming to me right now. Anyway, that school that was founded, that was the first of the boarding schools that the government operated, had that as its mission, to kill the Indian and save the child. Well, that's cultural genocide, is basically what we're talking about. Well, many, many other schools needed to be built, and the church got involved in that. The Jesuits also got involved in that because we were cooperating with the U.S. government on this endeavor. We also were guilty of getting co-opted by that really awful, evil mission to kill the Indian and save the child. Now, among the tribes on the reservations in the lower 48, like I said, many of them, very, very many of them, still live with a living memory of times when their tribe tried to be killed. Their land was stolen from them after treaties were signed. They have a living memory of that, and so there's trauma there. And I know a bit about that because I also worked for 4 years on the Spokane Reservation outside of Spokane. So I became familiar with the consequences of that trauma. It's different with folks in Alaska. The indigenous in Alaska, by and large, did not suffer that kind of genocidal history. Nevertheless, they were conquered and their lands were taken from them, their traditional lands, and they now have to live with a whole new way of relating to the land and to each other and to the economy. A lot of the folks in the villages, outlying villages on the Bering Sea coast, they still live a subsistence lifestyle for the most part, but that also is becoming compromised by the need to have money. So they also have to have a cash economy, a money economy as well to supplement that. And so they're in transition from that traditional lifestyle to adapting to a money economy. So in all of that, we Jesuits had a part to play. In many cases, our part was well-intentioned, recognizing the transitions the people were having to go through and wanting to educate them for that. In some cases, that makes us vulnerable to being accused of the same kind of cultural genocide. The Carlisle Boarding School is the name of the school in Missouri, that Carlisle Boarding Schools and other schools like it articulated in their mission statement. So we're part of that story. Now, your question was, how do I reconcile that? Well, the way I reconcile that, the way all of us Jesuits who are working in that field, is to, number one, name it and say, yeah, we are guilty of this. This happened. It's true. We had a part to play in it. Now our mission is reconciliation and empowerment. That's what our mission in Alaska has been ever since I was assigned there. It's to empower and help indigenous people who are in the Catholic population, empower them and give them the ability to be agents of enculturation for their local parishes. They can do the enculturation, we can't, because we're not part of their culture.
Sure.
But empowering them and accompanying them in the growth of an indigenous Catholic church was our mission.
I imagine that was fairly rewarding, especially since you were there as long as you were.
Oh, I loved it. Yeah, I really loved it.
So as much as you've loved your time as a Jesuit, I do want to go back to that first night after you were ordained. Where did that terror come from, Father?
You know, that's a good question. I've pondered that. I've pondered and puzzled on that a lot over the years. It's just me. It's just who I am, I guess. It's just how God works with me and has worked with me. I'm not an impulsive person, but one of my weaknesses is I'm very unorganized. I'm not a very well-organized person. That means I'm also adaptable. I can deal with changing circumstances with some ease. Not always easy, but with some ease I can. So I tend to not be a good planner. So ordination just kind of came down the tracks, and it just was like all of a sudden it was there, and there are certain ways of being prepared for it that I hadn't taken the steps for. So Anyway, it all worked out. I mean, very soon after I got into those villages and told people, I need you to teach me how to do this, not only did I find them teaching me, but what they were teaching me, I loved. I just loved what I was doing. I said to myself many, many times, I can't imagine anybody in the history of the world that loves what they're doing and who they are more than I do here.
That's a level of not just job satisfaction, but vocational satisfaction that I don't think a whole lot of people can, I'm not sure if boast is the word that I would use, but to say about their lives.
It's a grace, yeah. It came as grace.
So you're here in Missoula now. You've been here for a couple of weeks. How do you find our fair city?
Oh, I like it. One of the things I really enjoy about Missoula is it's very bike friendly, and I love biking. So as much as I can, I will take a bike to go from point A to point B. In fact, after I'd been here for a week, Craig Hightower said to me one day, he says, I can't believe you haven't driven the car even once yet. I hadn't backed it out of the garage, the car that's been assigned to me to use. No, I just would rather go either on foot or on bike, as long as the point A to point B is doable that way.
Well, and the distance from where you all are at to the church, that's a fairly reasonable little trek there.
It's easy to walk and extremely easy to bike.
Well, especially now that the air is cleared up. We had some lovely smoke for you when you first arrived.
Yeah. So that's another, there was that little complication, yeah.
No, and that's only for a few weeks a year when the entire state decides to burn down, or really the entire West decides to burn down. But things have cleared out now, so that biking and walking has to be considerably easier.
It's delightful.
And you have Greeno right there, the big park,
Yeah.
which, oh, so beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. We're in that Rattlesnake neighborhood there, and that whole neighborhood is just kind of delightful to explore on bike.
So you went from Denver, which is a pretty high population urban zone, to rural Alaska, which was not a very high population zone, and now to Missoula, which is kind of the Goldilocks, kind of in the middle between them.
Oh, that's well said.
And we're delighted to have you, Father. We really are.
Thank you.
You may say you're not organized, but when I came in to fetch you for this show, you were already working on your homily for this weekend.
Well,
Shoot.
it is Friday.
I'm an impromptu speaker, Father. I'd be sitting there the day of just being like, all right, what are our readings? All right, I'm good to go. I'm good to go.
Yeah.
So that preparation is a good thing. Yeah. So your role here at St. Francis, everybody kind of has a niche that they're occupying. Have you started to find yours? Started to see it a little bit?
Not yet, really, at least not what I can identify as a niche role, but my role is officially defined as I'm assistant pastor. Craig really made me laugh. He came and he sat down in my office, pretty much my first day there, and he said, I got a question for you. He says, right now you're defined as part-time at the parish. Would you like to go full-time? Would you like to be on full-time at the parish? No. I mean, so I'm 74. At 74, I don't have the energy.
You don't look 74, Father.
Oh, thanks. But I am. I'm 74, and there are times when I feel it. No, I don't have the same level of ambition and energy that I did when I was a young man. So part-time just seems like the right fit. Now, your question was about a niche role, though. So apart from just kind of the standard kind of plugging holes in the openings for pastoral responsibilities at the parish, I don't know. I've been asked this question a lot over the last several months as I was telling people that this is where I'm coming. Well, what are you going to be doing? And I'd say, I don't know. Right now, my imagination, I can imagine a whole horizon of possibilities for me to fit in. As I explained, I have a background in doing ministry training. I love that. I love doing ministry training. I love teaching opportunities. I really enjoy working with people in Ignatian spirituality. So I'll look forward to getting more familiar with the SEAL program. I worked with that there in Ontario and just loved it, and worked with some retreatants at the spiritual center where I was. Those are opportunities I'd like to explore. I also have a background in media. I studied photography and videography at Creighton University under Don Dahl, who was a Jesuit, a rather world-famous photographer. And I have some experience of using those skills, especially when COVID hit. Some of those skills came in very handy. I might look for opportunities to explore that field too. I don't know. We'll have to see, Nicholas. We'll have to see what comes up.
I love it.
I'm still open.
Have you done any fly fishing, Father?
I grew up fishing and hunting. My dad taught us boys how to fish and hunt. He loved it, and we grew up loving to do it. I never learned to fly fish. But now that I'm here in Missoula, I've been telling some people, now it's time for me to learn how to fly fish. So I'm looking forward to that.
It's a very popular pastime around here.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of it happening.
Have you made it up to St. Ignatius Mission up there?
Not since I've been here. I have been to St. Ignatius a couple times during my years as a Jesuit, but only just to pop in. So no, the answer to your question is no.
Father Victor is really, really a cool person. He came on to help us understand the Trinity a little bit more. So just a fantastic conversationalist, a very accomplished theologian. So if you haven't had a huge chance to interact with him,
I'm looking forward to that, actually, yeah.
In terms of what you're hoping to get out of being here in Missoula, what are your thoughts? What's your scheme, as it were?
Well, I wouldn't mind if this is my last move. In other words, I'd like to be here for the duration, whatever the duration is. But other than that, I don't have any particular ambition. I'm on a learning curve on several different fronts, and learning how to be a priest here in Missoula. I suppose I'd have to say maybe if I have an ambition, that's it. Now I got to learn how to be a priest in Missoula.
Well, it's not so bad. At least from what I've observed. I myself am not a priest in Missoula, but I do work with them. It's a wonderful staff here. I very much enjoy it.
I'm really delighted with the staff that I've met here so far. In fact, I'm a little bit agog at how much is happening here and how much people are doing, and the enormity of the whole umbrella of ministries that's done here at St. Francis Xavier Parish is remarkable. I'm really impressed. Including what you're doing, Nicholas, including this.
Well, this is a blessing, this ministry, getting to sit down and have fascinating conversations with fascinating people about spiritual matters. I hardly believe it's a job sometimes. What do they say? If you love your work, you'll never work a day in your life, or something along those lines?
Yeah.
Well, Father, do you have any other words for the listeners before we end for the day, by way of introduction?
I don't think I do. Now, thank you for asking that. I'll probably wish later on that I'd said X or Y, but no. Thank you for all the questions you asked me and for the way you let me tell my story.
Oh, of course. And I'm a spiritual director with the SEAL program, so I very much look forward to working with you there, too.
Cool. All right.
Well, Father, thanks for coming on, and look forward to seeing what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us today as we walk as pilgrims this road together. If you feel called to learn more, please consider checking out St. Francis Xavier or your local Catholic church. All are welcome into our community as God loves us all equally. If you are interested in supporting the Vox SFX podcast, please visit sfxmissoula.org/donate. Until next time, go forth in peace and be the light of Christ in someone's day.
By Jove, we've got it.